Welcome to our Awakening Together channel. We're so glad that you're here. If you'd like more information about our other programs and Satsangs, please visit our website, awakening-together.org. Please enjoy the Satsang and thank you for watching.
Thanks so much, Jana. Yes. I was watching people stream in here, and it brought to mind that these monthly satsangs are one of our most popular events. We have the pleasure of having Reverend Myron Jones with us, who is a Course in Miracles instructor, a teacher, and so we've got an hour and a half to find out this path of awakening through Myron's eyes. So Myron, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Just fine, yes. Hear you.
Great.
Fine. Just fine. So, all right. Well, I was thinking Tess Hughes, who awakened some time ago, we actually had a presentation from her a few years ago at our fall retreat. And she wrote a book, and she said in this book, I can see now how that I was guided to awaken. And she said, until I got to that point, I really couldn't see the steps of my path. So let's start there. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about your background, your history, and how this has evolved for you?
Okay, well, just briefly, I started the Course in Miracles in 1981, and it was pretty new at that time, especially where I was in Louisiana. And it just, of course, like it does for everyone, it just turned my life around slowly, very slowly, turned me around. And at some point I found Pathways of Light, which once I found Pathways of Light, everything began to take off more. There was structure and wonderful courses, and I became a minister. Who knew, that would happen? That was a total surprise right there. And also I began studying under Regina. She was like my mentor, and I started, I don't know, we kind of met each other, discovered each other somehow, I think maybe on Yahoo, a Yahoo group back in the day, when everybody did Yahoo groups. And she was receiving NTI. She was scribing NTI at that time. It was so cool because she was just so open and honest, so transparent. And she would she would describe a portion of it, and she would share it, and she would talk about it on whatever it was before Awakening Together. I kind of forget now what it was called, but she would do that multiple times during the week. And so it's like we got to follow her day by day, as she went through stuff. And I still remember one time when she was having issues with what was his name that she was with for a while? The guy that she was that was living with her for, I can't remember his name. Sorry. Anyway, she was having some issues with that, and she was having to work through it. She was having to get through that being rejected, feeling rejected. That was when she let go of rejectability. And I remember listening to her, and I could visualize it, because this is just by radio. We didn't have Zoom. And she's describing, how she felt in her voice. It was just like she was just done. It was awful. She described herself as just laying on the couch, just not even able to get up. But I was so amazed about how she could do this. She could just jump right into it and just stay with it. my path wasn't like that. Mine was very gentle, very slow, one step at a time, one baby step at a time sometimes. And when she was going through this, and when it came to an end, rejectability was gone. I mean, it was done. She didn't have that anymore. And I thought, man, that would be so cool, you know, just to work through it, just to go ahead and push right through it and then be through. But that just wouldn't work for me because I was too fragile. You know, it just would not have worked for me. It would have just crushed me. And so, Holy Spirit knows exactly what each person needs. And so luckily I knew enough to leave that to the Holy Spirit. And so for me, it was just a very slow movement forward. And I would say probably starting about 2012, things began to change, began to turn around for me. I mean, I'd been moving forward the whole time, but it sped up sometime around 2012. And last year, something happened. There was a shift. And in this shift, it's just a lot of stuff fell away. It's really hard to describe, actually. I kind of wish that as it was happening that I've been writing better, writing more things down so I could remember exactly how that felt. But it just shifted is all I can say. And that, just for an example, I went to see Regina doing a workshop in Portland last year. And when I got there, she and I were sharing a room. And so we got to chat a lot, which was really cool. We don't get to do that anymore, it seems, but that was fun. And I was telling her about my trip there. It was the craziest thing. Absolutely everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. The flight got diverted to a little small airport because of weather. There was nothing to eat. There was one bathroom, well, you know, men and women, but there, I don't know how many of us were there, maybe 100. It was just awful. And it got to the point to where obviously they were not going to be able to take off. And so we said, well, okay, you know, surely we can get a hotel, because that's what the airlines do whenever it's their fault, because at that point they figured out that the airplane didn't have windshield wipers. Who knew, you know? And they could not fly without windshield wipers because either it was raining or it might rain. And so we said, okay, well, how about a hotel room? That's what airports do. And they, oh yeah, sure, no problem. Well, then later they tell us there's only like one hotel there and there's no room. Oh, and there are no cabs, and the Uber drivers and whatever, they just not, it's too late. They're not doing it. So it was just the craziest thing. And I wound up finally getting back to the airport and spending the night in the airport. And then finally getting the next day to my destination. And so I was telling her about it. And as I was telling her, I was saying, it was pretty interesting. You know, I said, a lot of people were very upset because of missing their connections and things like that. I said, but I got to talk to a lot of people. It was fun. I learned about this guy who has a job I never even knew existed, and he told me all about it. And I said, I got to spend the night in an airport. I've always heard people talk about that, but I've never seen anyone, I've never done it myself. And I said, no, I got that experience. I got to spend the night in the airport. And that was kind of, see, that was part of the shift. It was like the stuff didn't bother me anymore. That just fell away. I won't say without any effort, because I had been all along using A Course in Miracles, looking at my thoughts, asking the Holy Spirit to correct them. I mean, I've made a lifetime, it feels like a lifetime effort toward that, and it paid off. but the shift was somewhat sudden, you know, in that. And so that was one of the things that fell away, is I really don't get upset about stuff too much anymore. And so that was really cool. And Regina recognized that, and she said something about it. I forget what she called it. It's just a feeling of everything's okay. And it's not perfect, because I still have ego thoughts. And sometimes I listen to them. Sometimes I believe them. But I just don't listen to them very often or believe them very much. So it's much easier now to let them go. So basically, you know, that's been the trajectory of the path, you know, that I've been on. I would say now I'm still watching my thoughts. I'm still watching them. I'm still doing what I need to do with that. And they do come up sometimes, especially since the virus. There's been more opportunity, you know, for things to come forward, and that's been good. I've had a lot of healing around stuff that I didn't even know I needed healing. You know, that's the good thing about what's happening right now with the virus and the political situation and unrest and all of that. It's like it's just shaking everything up, you know, I'm letting all the stuff come up to the surface so we can look at it. And so I've been doing that, and it's been fine. I've had some stuff going on with family members that I've had to look at, and that's gone very well. So now I've shifted my attention, like Regina had said in her talk, you know, there's this two parts to it. There's undoing, looking at the stuff that needs to be looked at, letting it go, being very aware of the darkness, not being worried about that. That was another thing that changed. The guilt fell away, which was kind of a separate little story, but the guilt fell away. So you can, when you don't have guilt, you can afford to look at your thoughts. You can look at them, you know, it doesn't matter. It's not upsetting. So when that happened, that was extremely, extremely helpful, having that fall away. So now my focus, even though I'm still doing the work that whatever comes up I do, but my focus is more now on going within and looking at the self, looking for the self, discovering the self, still working on that. That's right. And when Regina was talking about being, and so I wrote it down, because if I didn't write it down, taking time to be, then I would pretend I forgot by tomorrow, because that probably is one of the hardest things for me to do, is just to be, because I've always been a do kind of person, a real achiever, you know, always got a goal. In fact, I was reading in that book by Helen Hamilton, that Dissolving the Ego. And in one part, either in the book or in one of her talks, she talks about just meditating without any goal. Don't have any goal. Not even a goal to be peaceful. Not even a goal to, to go within and experience the self. Nothing, just no goal. And boy, when I got through with that, I got up and I was talking to Jesus about this. I said, that is the hardest thing I've ever tried to do in my life, because I had no idea what a goal-oriented person I was. It was just to just sit there and not have a goal in mind. I was like, holy cow, how am I going to do this? So I'm working, really, that is my focus at the moment, is improving my ability to meditate, to spend more time in meditation, to do the awareness, watching awareness, to really be able to do that without, like, in 20 minutes going, ooh, what time is it now? And it is helping, it is working, it is moving forward, because there was a time when I would be 5 minutes and I'd be peeking at the clock, you know, what time is it now? Has it been 20 minutes? No, it's been 5. But now it's like I can go 20 minutes without feeling antsy, and sometimes it's longer. And I'm I want to do it. And so that's a big change too. You know, so I know that it's moving forward at the rate that it needs to move forward. So I'm not concerned about it. That was another neat thing that happened, is that I quit being, you know, before it was like there was spiritual aspiration, but it was kind of very driven. Like, I've got to do this. I want, like, do that, check it off the list, you know, go to the next thing. Okay, enlightenment, check that off. What's next? You know, kind of a feeling about it, and of like, I've got to do it. I've got to do it. I've got to succeed. And that fell away by itself. I didn't do anything to accomplish that. It just simply fell away. So now it just feels good. And I feel very calm about it, and whatever happens, happens. And what doesn't happen, well, that's fine. It'll happen at some point. Okay, so that's been the trajectory of how it's going, George.
Thanks so much, Myron. Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I identified mostly as a Christian until about 20 years ago. And then I discovered the Unity Church. And at about the same time, I discovered A Course in Miracles. And so really the Course was my first study. And I had a great difficulty with the Course. I couldn't read the text. I'd read a page and then I get to the bottom and realize that my mind went somewhere else after the first sentence or two. And so what was your experience when you first started studying the Course?
Well, like you, I was in a church. I was Catholic. And then I went to Unity. And there I found A Course in Miracles. And for me, when I started reading the Course, I loved it. I was like a novel. I couldn't wait to turn the page. And that went on for a good while into the Course. And then I hit something I couldn't understand, you know, and then I kind of stopped. The hard thing for me was the lessons. And I would do the lessons up to somewhere the first 50 or so. And then I would just hit that wall and like, no, I can't, you know, I would not say even to myself, I can't do this, or I don't want to do this. I would say, oh, I forgot to do it. Oh, I forgot again, you know, until I would start to feel guilty for forgetting all the time. And then I would just not do it, because then that way I wouldn't have to think about how I would forget, or how I was too lazy to do it, or whatever. And then Jesus said something in the Course. He said, it's not that you're lazy. He said, it's just that you don't think you're worth the effort. And I thought, okay, you know what? That's good and that's bad. So good, I'm not lazy, but bad, I don't think I'm worth it. But eventually, and it was actually when I started working with, when I started doing the courses of Pathways of Light, before the courses, they had like a forum, and it's an online forum, and you could talk about the lesson with other people. And I'd never had that. I'd never had anyone to talk to about the Course. So this was exciting, or at least very seldom had anyone. And so it's pretty excited. And I did the lessons every day because I didn't want to be left behind. I wanted to be able to talk to everybody. We didn't talk literally, we typed it, but you know, we got to discuss it in that way. And so that was the first time I ever went through all through the lessons. And shoot, I've been doing the Course for, I guess, 10 years by that time. But then once I went through the lessons, everything started changing for me. It really picked up at that point. And then in 2012, remember I mentioned 2012? That was a year I started a journal on the text. And I would journal on every paragraph. So every day I would take a paragraph, and I'm still not through. But then I kind of put it away for a little while because I had some other things going on. But every day I would journal in a paragraph, and then I would share it with people. Whatever I journal, I would just share it. And when I started doing it, I had done this with the lessons. And in fact, I do it with the lessons every year. I had done it with the lessons. I had done it with the manual for teachers. And I had run out of things to do it with. So the only thing left was a text. So I put it off, but I kept getting that nudge, do the text. And when I did it, what came through for me was don't study with anybody. Don't talk about it with any, like I could do my writing and sharing, but don't go to any more workshops, because I was a workshop junkie. I went to every workshop you ever heard of. I said, don't do that. Just listen to me. And so that's what I did. And I did that for quite a while. I think I'm up to like chapter 14 or something. And I took a little break, or maybe 15, but I took a little break from it. But when I did that, and I began to understand why, and it was because I had done like a lot of people do. I just gathered a lot of information from a lot of different people, and not all of it was what was being said in the course. Some of it was people's interpretation. And so I had interpretations, and he wanted me to start over and just go within and not without, trying to find the answer to things. Quit asking other people, go within. And that's what I did. And so that was a big change for me. It made a big difference.
Great. The subject of journaling has come up a couple of times in earlier programs, and that's one thing that I have always resisted. Might have good intentions to start. Like several weeks ago, I got a fresh tablet out and I journaled one page, and I had every intention of doing it consistently, and that one page remains the only journal in that tablet. So there again, there's the prompt that journaling is important.
Yeah.
Well,
but for me,
now I did it kind of the reverse, because I had such a hard time reading the text. I thought, well, the lessons will be easy, okay? And I've always lived my life like I do it my way. I started doing the workbook, and I thought, well, I'm just going to go through it casually, okay? I'm not going to follow the instructions. I've never been great about following instructions. So, then I'll go back through it. And meantime, I'll go back and try to understand and read through the text. So that was my process. But so you've seemed to pretty much focused on A Course in Miracles. Is there other influences other than the Course, or have you pretty much primarily been Course?
Well, A Course in Miracles is my path. And so it's just natural that I would follow that. But last year I did Gentle Healing 1. And I have to tell you, Regina, that I was so resistant. I've never been so resistant to anything in my life. It was like I was suffering through that year. But I knew I was supposed to do it. So I did. And it's just funny to me now, because it just doesn't seem to matter that Myron didn't want to do it. That what needed to happen happened anyway. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I did benefit from it greatly, which I guess maybe one of the main things that I got from, besides having Regina's very good tips, and I'm still doing it now. I'm doing it with other people, using it, and I like 2 different groups. I'm using it, not exactly the way that Regina does it, but very much so with all of her tips.
Before we go on, Myron, Sonia put a comment in here. Myron, you've had a recommendation on someone who put together a journal that was very helpful. And she says yes. So she's asking that question.
Yeah, that's how I started doing my, that's how I started doing my daily lessons. Reverend Deb and Paul Phelps had made this journal that they sold, and it was it just had every day, it had like a way to do it. It would start off with something like you know, what you understood from the lesson, and then asking Holy Spirit for clarity, and then you write some more about that. I forget the exact form that it goes in, but it's something like that. And I still use that, actually. I don't do it so formally all the time. Well, I wasn't. This year I started again, actually. And so actually I've got it right here so I could tell you. I put my initial insight, just whatever it means to me as I read it. My daily application, which is usually the stories, like how I actually use it in my life. Because if you don't use A Course in Miracles, where you're just gathering information, and you may as well just read a good book or watch a movie, you know, because you're not going to get anything out of it. So I apply it to my life, and I share those stories, whether they're flattering or not. And then I put insights from Holy Spirit. And I don't do that too much anymore, but I still use the ones that I've done. I still share from that. And it's like I just ask Holy Spirit, what do you want me to know about this? And then I just type whatever comes to me. Now it just sort of comes as part of whatever I'm writing. It's not always that separated, you know, from, it's more like inspired writing now, as opposed to just taking down that. And then there's gratitude, you know, it's where I express my gratitude for what I'm getting. And then I do, and now I've added doing Regina's tips. And then I write my thoughts about what I'm learning from Regina as I do it. And so that's the way that I do that. And it's been a helpful way to do it. And by writing it, George, one of the reasons why I do it in that form as doing a journal, whether I'm doing it about that or something else, is that if I'm just thinking about it, the ego will tend to take me off course. No, so, or stop it before it's finished. You know, all of a sudden I'm thinking about what I'm going to cook for lunch. You know, it's just, whereas if I'm writing it out, it can be so much more thorough. And I write, and like what I've done is over the years, I've kept all my journals. So every year for the daily lessons, I put up 3 documents. What I wrote in 2018, what I wrote in 2019, and this is 2020. And I read both. And then I use some of what I've already written, some of it is new, some of it I changed, but I get to see it, you know, I get to see the progression of how, you know, how my understanding, how it's changed, and how my practice, the most important thing, my practice, how my practice has helped me to move in the direction I wanted to go, to fulfill that spiritual aspiration. But what I got from Regina from doing the gentle healing that first year, what I got, whether I wanted it or not, was more of a sense of what's next. You know, with A Course in Miracles, the main focus of A Course in Miracles is the undoing of the ego. And he does gently guide us a little further, but that's not the focus. So through doing the gentle healing, I got a feeling for looking within for the self. Jesus starts it early, and I just ignored it, I guess, because like in one of the early lessons, he says, "Go within and search for God." How much clearer could it be? You know, just where am I going to find God, and what am I going to find when I go within? You know, so somehow I just read past that without taking in what he was actually saying. And during the gentle healing, it's given me, it gave me the motivation and the impetus to do that, to start moving inward.
Now, you know, I've heard from several different sources, don't try to understand, just look at the material without the need to understand it. Does that make any sense to you?
Well, maybe to a point, because we're not going to truly understand. At least I have never reached a point where I truly understand, where I really know very much. So, you know, but I do have, it does help me. It's kind of like, you have to have a degree of understanding in order for your mind to accept this new teaching. For you to even open to it, you have to have some degree of understanding. That's why we have the text and not just a workbook. You've got to have a foundation there that you can start building on. And so, so yes, a certain amount of understanding, but I don't have to understand. And I do agree with that. I do not have to understand. That's not necessary for it to happen. Just like with doing the gentle healing, I didn't have to be, I didn't even have to be completely open to it. I could be actively resisting it, and it still worked for me. You know, so understanding wasn't necessary. It was just that as far as I can tell, personally, what has really mattered and what has made a difference is my desire for it. If there's a desire in me to have the healing, to have the correction, to discover the self within, if there's a desire for it, then it's going to happen. And so even though I had some resistance there, I had the desire. And mostly because I knew I was supposed to. I could feel it. Every time I would think, you know what, I've got so much to do, I'm just going to quit this. And then I would be like, no, you can't. No, you can't. This is where you're supposed to be. I just knew it. So the understanding I don't think is necessary, but I think that sometimes it's necessary just because it's a certain amount of understanding allows, it's kind of like a bridge. You know, you're building this bridge so that you can cross it. And so like every time I would get some degree of understanding or some practice that would make something more real to me, it was like I was building another little section to that bridge, you know. So that, in that way, it is helpful.
Yeah, you know, I think most of us in Awakening Together have studied for many years, and we have a lot of knowledge. We know a lot of stuff. And yet I've had a very strong feeling growing, I don't know anything, but there's a trust in that not knowing, that George may not know and George may not understand, but George is just the outward aspect of spirit looking through George. So there's a trust in there.
Yeah.
You talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting too, because when people used to say things like that, you know, when they would write about it or talk about it, and they would say that talking about the the personality stuff, talking about how, I don't know, just that idea that that's not me. And it didn't mean anything to me. It would annoy me. Like I would just, don't talk stupid. I don't want to hear this yet. But now it's just like, it's like you have to almost experience it to know what people are, if you really want to know what people are talking about. You can just go along with it, you know, just to be polite or just to sound like you know what they're talking about. But to really understand it, you have to almost experience it, I think, or at least that was true for me. And so now I really feel a distancing from the body personality, Myron, a fondness for her, but not her. And yet I'm still not fully I don't experience myself as my true self, you know, in the way that some people have. Like, for instance, I was reading Collision with the Infinite. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And her experience of, she just knew she wasn't in the body. And so nothing really changed because we're never in the body. But she knew she wasn't in the body. And she experienced herself. She said she was behind and to the left, watching her life, you know, watching that life wasn't even hers. She didn't identify with it at all. And I have not reached that at all. But I have reached the point where I just, I'm more identified with my capital S self, my true self, my awareness, than I am with Myron. Every once in a while I slip back into Myron's story for a little while, and then it's like, ugh, it feels uncomfortable, you know, and so I come back out of it as quickly as I can. But I kind of forgot your question. Sorry, George.
That's all right. That's all right. I did too. Actually, Audrey had asked about, was there a book that you used to assist in your journaling? And then she said, I found it, Illumination Journal for A Course in Miracles.
Yeah. That was my first, when I first got it, that's what I used, yes.
Okay.
Now I've kind of maybe changed it a little bit, you know, to suit me over the years, but yeah. Thank you.
Right, great. So, actually, I almost feel kind of selfish. It's almost like I got a one-on-one with Myron and everybody else just gets to listen. So, we can certainly open ourselves up to questions. We've got almost an hour left, 50 minutes. So there's plenty of time. And is there anybody out there that has questions that they would like to ask Myron?
I see. Myron, can you talk a little more of that being as Myron and leaving the discomfort of it? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about that. I don't really even know how to describe it. It's not like I try to, it's not like I try to do any of this. It's just what happens. Okay, so an example might be, I had a lot of little physical things that were going on with me, like, and which is unusual for me, because I in the past I never got sick much, and I have this thing with my thumb, like a trigger thumb, and I got a problem with my foot, and then I broke my tooth. It's all happening all at once, just one thing after another. And so I just do with it what I do with everything. It's like, okay, what can I learn from this? What does it have to teach me? And I just kept working with that idea, and then doing whatever I needed to do. You know, going to the doctor, going to a physical therapist, went to the dentist, that kind of thing. But I did feel like something was wrong, and there was something I wasn't getting, and that felt uncomfortable. That knowing that I was missing something, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. And so I asked Spirit, I said, okay, help me with this. Help me to see what am I missing here? What is it that I'm not seeing? And I heard it very clearly in my mind. You're too focused on your body. And I thought, well, my thumb hurts. My foot hurts, you know. But after I heard that, I began to notice that that's what was happening. It's like I was thinking about my body all the time. I was thinking about, should I take this medicine? Should I go to that physical therapist? I started noticing what I was eating, how I was looking. It was just like body, 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 body. And I thought, oh, wow, I didn't even notice that until I asked. And so that was me falling into the story. I let these unusual circumstances where I had these body issues kind of draw me into the story. And I kind of got lost in it, but I knew what to do about it. You know, I knew that the answer is there. All we have to do is ask for it. And then once I saw the answer, well, then I started backing out of the story. But being in the story is very uncomfortable. It's like you don't fit there anymore. And maybe an easy way to say this is that most of the time I'm happy. Most of the time I'm peaceful, regardless of what's going on. And so when I'm not happy and I'm not peaceful, it's very apparent to me. It's very uncomfortable to be there. And it's kind of funny, since most of my life I was angry or depressed, you know, until I found the Course. And then it was like, sometimes I was angry and sometimes I was depressed and sometimes I wasn't, you know, so it just sort of started changing. But now I can't go there anymore without being really uncomfortable with it. I recognize it right away, and I'm immediately like, what can I do? What needs to be, what do I need to do here? What is it I'm supposed to be learning? What have I missed? What am I thinking that isn't true? Basically, because everything starts with a thought. It's all about thought. It's all about thought. So let me find the thought, and it's not necessarily a single thought. Sometimes it's just an attitude of thought. Like you can't, like, at least in my experience, I can't always say, okay, so I got sick. Okay, what was I thinking when I got sick? You know, it doesn't always work that way. Although occasionally I can see a connection, but a lot of times it's just kind of a general thinking, you know, that needs to be looked at. But all I have to do is ask, and I'll be shown. Maybe not right in that moment. I don't always get a nice booming voice coming down and telling me stuff, but in my writing or in a lesson or maybe just working with somebody, we'll be talking and suddenly I'm like, oh, that's what it was. You know, so I don't know if that's what you were asking, Lynn, if that's what you were asking me about. But okay, great.
Okay, anybody else have a burning question? Anne's been sitting quietly in the wings there.
Yes, thank you, George. And thank you, Reverend Myron. I loved when you said how, you know, it's all about, you're still watching your thoughts. It's all about thought. And I loved when you said how, God, you get a handle on this guilt. And all of a sudden, watching the thoughts isn't so painful, because the resistance there is the guilt that comes up that thinks, I don't really want to see it. I think it's true. Maybe it's true, or whatever the actual ideation is. But and then you had mentioned earlier about how guilt has kind of found its way out of you. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that.
Oh yeah, that was pretty cool, actually. Because I've been letting go of guilt slowly. You know, we start with a specific journaling. And so I would feel guilty about something, and then I would work with Holy Spirit and I'd let that go. And then I'd feel guilty about something else, you know, because all these different things are not really different. They're really just the belief in guilt, but they show up as images or symbols in the world of the guilt in the mind. And after a while, I began to realize that, it's just guilt. It doesn't matter that it seems to be I'm guilty for something I said, or I think he's guilty. Same thing. It's just guilt. It doesn't matter where I'm projecting it or what it's looking like. But I would say the last thing to go was I always had a lot of guilt about parenting. And I would think back on things that had happened, things that I said to my kids, or I did, or I failed to do, or whatever. And I would just feel all this crushing guilt. And sometimes it was way, way out of proportion. Well, probably it was always way out of proportion. But sometimes it was way out of proportion. But it didn't matter. It just somehow, it was like it was just clinging to me. And actually, what I realized now that I'm past it, it wasn't clinging to me. I was clinging to it. But I remember one night, I was laying in bed trying to go to sleep. And it reminds me of this little cartoon where the guy is saying he's laying on his bed and he's having all these thoughts, guilty thoughts. And he said, I'm so sorry I bought that memory mattress. And that was me. I'm laying there on my memory mattress going, oh my God, I can't believe I said that to my daughter. And I said, why am I doing this? Why do I keep going back to this? And I said, I am so tired of this. I don't want this anymore. Well, I went to sleep that night, and the next morning I had the thought, I'm going to ask Kate Grease, how she did it. Because I remember Kate and I spoke before her awakening, and she had all the same problems I had, and a lot of the guilt, and she got rid of it. It's like, that's her thing. She got rid of guilt. So I said, how did you do that? And she said, Myron, she said, one day I just decided it was time for this to go. And she said, I talked to Jesus and I told him, I said, I feel like I have this black hole in me and it is just filled with guilt and it's awful. And I don't want it anymore. And I'm asking you to heal me. And she said, it was like he just put his hands in around that hole and he just brought his hands together. And when he did, the guilt was gone. And she says, Myron, she said, that will work for you because you trust Jesus. And so she said, just ask him to do that for you. Well, I didn't use the same visual, but I did that. I said, okay, Jesus, here I am. I'm done. I'm done with the guilt. I want to be free. And it just happened. It wasn't one of those like slowly over time, you start letting go. No, it was just gone. It was like stories that I've been holding on to for more than half my life that would bring me to tears just thinking about them. And they're just gone. It's what Jesus calls a miracle. It's when your perception is healed and then you just, it's never come back. Now, I won't say that I never have a thought of guilt about someone else or myself, but I don't have anything I'm interested in. I mean, it's like a little thought will come in and then it goes out because I'm not interested. Or I'll see a thought about somebody being guilty, myself or someone else, and I'll think, oh, that's weird. I don't know what that's all about, but I know I don't want it. But all of those guilty thoughts, and the next night I'm laying there in bed and I'm like, well, is it really gone? I mean, could that happen? Can it just disappear like that? And so what happened was I had two of my favorite ego stories of guilt, and they occurred to me in my mind, just played out. And I went, oh, there they are. And then I went, oh, I don't feel anything. There was no feeling. It was like reading an uninteresting story. And so I said, okay, great. Well, then the next day I was doing a meditation And it was a guided meditation by somebody. I'm thinking maybe Gina Lake or somebody. And the suggestion was to bring something up that you would like to be done with. And just out of habit, because I couldn't think of anything else, I brought up these guilt stories again. And I heard so clearly in my mind, it was like really like somebody just talking to me and said, it's done. You don't have to keep doing this. And it was just gone. And so that was very important, because that happened right before the shift. And I feel like I felt like it was connected. So anyway, so that's how it happened.
Thank you. That's super clear. And it sounds like it's going within and, you know, kind of just really getting clear in your heart what you're ready for, and then asking.
Exactly. It's desire. My desire to be free was greater than my desire to hold on to the guilt. And that was really what did it. You know, the visualization of Jesus. And I don't doubt that Jesus helps me. I mean, he said he would, you know, but, and Jesus, Holy Spirit, you know, whatever. I know that I have help. I've experienced that help. And so I know it, but it cannot happen without my desire. And I just had to get to that place. That was all. For me, it just took a long time. It doesn't have to.
What I've noticed about guilt feelings, the George character has a lot of excuses to feel guilt. George has created a lot of, I am bad, I'm not good enough. Gee, I sure wish I hadn't done it that way. But the thing that I've noticed is, as these thoughts come up, they don't really have a lot of energy. It's sort of like George is forgiving those things of the past. So I don't know if that's the way it happens for everyone, but it feels a whole lot better than the other way. So.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. And you know, it's really important to let go of this idea of guilt, because it holds us in our story. You know, when we're guilty, it's like I watch my mind. I've always watched my mind very carefully for a very, very long time. I've been doing that. And so I'm aware whenever thoughts come up. But when it first started doing it, it was slow going, because I would notice a thought, an ego thought, maybe something ugly, some ugly thought in my mind, and then I would feel so guilty. Well, who wants to watch your mind if you're going to feel terrible every time you find a guilty thought? Plus, it's just like that guilt is like the glue that, you know, that keeps us stuck here, you know, and there's no point in it. Guilt isn't real. It's just a concept. It's an idea. That doesn't make it real. It's just another thought. And so there's no reason to hold on to it. And I know I'm saying that as if it's just like, oh, well, just throw it off. But it, you know, and I do realize it's not that easy. It wasn't that easy for me. But once you do it, then you realize, oh yeah, it really was easy. It's just, I can remember also in the beginning, whenever I was, when I was first doing this work, I remember thinking, why is this so hard? In fact, that was my favorite refrain. Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to do? And it's not hard. We just have to come to that decision about what we really want in whatever way we do. It's just, I've noticed that there are, you know, many, many different ways to do it. And everyone has their own particular path, their own way of getting there. But that's the place that, you know, it's like I want to say to everyone, don't believe in guilt. It's a waste of time. And just if you can't if you can't just automatically go there, which I couldn't, I'm not saying that you can, but let that be like a light, you know, that you're walking toward. Is the guilt isn't real. Just keep remembering, it's just a concept. And we have lots and lots of concepts, and almost none of them are true. Probably none of them. In fact, one time, not so long ago, I had read something in the course that I'd never noticed before, and it really changed for me how I saw things. But when I talked about it to other people, I wasn't getting any feedback, like they're not either not getting it or they think I'm nuts, one or the other, you know. And so it's like, am I seeing this wrong, you know? And so I wrote to Regina. I told her what was going on, and I asked her, you know, am I totally off on this? And Regina said something really important that I have never forgotten, and that I give the same advice now, is that if you can write it down, if you can say it in words, then it's not the truth. It's just, is it helpful? Did I get that right, Regina? That's what I understood you to say. And so it's just, is it helpful or is it not helpful? And that opened up a lot for me, from my understanding of A Course in Miracles and all the other paths that I have looked at and taken things from, helpful things from, is we're not looking at truth here. In fact, A Course in Miracles tells you that. He says that knowledge, the true knowledge is, we don't find it here. We just get true perception. Our perception gets truer and truer, gets closer and closer. So that was a really helpful thing. Thank you for that, Regina. So now I don't question it. You know, I don't look at it and say, oh, is that really true? I just say, is that going to help me?
So I see a note here that there's some people that have called in. Caller number 3 was unmuted earlier. Caller number 3, if you really want to speak, just go ahead and unmute yourself and speak. Or anyone else, if they have a question that they would just as soon speak out instead of writing, just go ahead and do so.
I see some of my friends here. Hi, everybody.
I just don't, George, you said we could speak?
Yes.
Okay. So Myron, I've known you were one of the first people that I called when somebody had told me, I opened the book of A Course in Miracles and I'm like lost. And I was struggling at the time. So I had spoken to you years ago. Now there was another group they were laughing because all I said was Marianne Williamson had been someone I followed, right? And I think that at the time, you had one of your kids had a problem that you were in the 12 steps, right?
Al-Anon, yeah.
Yeah, because I was having that issue. So, you know, and I actually continued to have that issue up until like maybe 2 years ago. So you were, you know, and I watched, I think, you know, Liz Cronkite told me about ACIM Gather, but I think it was you also that told me that. A lot of people would come to you. People would give your number out to anybody, because the course is ridiculous when you open it. It's just, it depends on for me, it was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. But what happened for me was I had some clear seeing before. I don't know where it came from, you know, because really it's our inner teacher. It's not a book, it's the experience that we're going through. But I love how you shared, I'm done with guilt. Because, you know, what's happened for me, and I don't know how many years I'm in this, but is that the stuff's moved down from the head. So it's going down. I was sharing that today. We have a Sangha every Sunday, and leads us. And, you know, what I'm noticing, like a lot of times my children were the triggers for me. I mean, the biggest triggers for me were like they're a game changer. They just like, just what they had to go through. So my oldest boy's here, and instead of me seeing what he's believing, finally I'm seeing, because there's patterns. I'm seeing the patterns being played out in him and me, but it's no longer in my head. It's moving down. Because, just to say I got rid of like a pattern, and that would be guilt, I guess, but I'm looking at it through, Regina's been a teacher for me. Everyone has, Helen Hamilton's a teacher for some of us too. It's all the same to me. But the thing that I'm noticing is that I'm experiencing now when I look, I don't know if you did this with your children, but like my son has, my oldest son has a really hard time. He wants to control, like this virus, I call him the virus, he's the virus police. I mean, he actually like wants to keep me like from dying, and so he's Woody Allen. So anyway, he was here for a couple of days, and I was watching, because what I got from within is, no, forget your son. You want control, because you're watching him want control. And I looked at how it all came to me, like when I started to make that belief up, and I imagine that most people have it, but mine is to a point where it's so insidious, that it's been, and I am not like Regina in the sense, like you said, you were fragile. I also could not do what she did. It's just not the way, I think the Holy Spirit or inner wisdom brings us where we need to be. When a teacher shows up in my life, I look at them as a gift. I don't look at them like as a competition, because I know that it's my mind that has to heal. So it's kind of been really interesting now that I'm seeing the truth now, that it's all me. It's all like, Cheryl Valentine, do you remember her?
Yeah.
Okay, because I have her book. Oh my God, it's me. It's me. So it's like, you get that on different levels, but isn't it true that you keep it, you can talk about it through chakras or whatever, but it seems to me like it's all starting to be less painful. And I, like Anne asked you, we both want to be done with guilt.
Yeah.
Because it's a concept, but I still get the guilty thoughts, and one of the reasons why would I want to control unconsciously? Because of my guilt, because then I'm safe. It's always about my safety.
Yes.
So, but I do have your book. I have your book on the lessons. I love that you do. I share with Dove on Thursdays, but I know you used to be on Saturdays, right? And I just want to tell you that you've helped so many of us. You've been wonderful.
Well, thank you. That's really nice for you to tell me that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're quite a teacher. Everybody's in a different place, but they're all helpful, Yeah,
that's right.
Thanks.
You're right. And, that was a thing for me with my son. That was one of the things I had to go through. My youngest son, who I was very, very close to, am very close to, and always have been. We've always been very close. And he always enjoyed drinking, but he reached a point to where it changed, and clearly he had become an alcoholic. And he was in denial that that's what was happening, but his life just started falling apart, and it was really awful. And I'm not going to go into all the details because there's no reason to, but he would wind up in ICU more than once. He wound up in jail. He wound up in a fight, got his jaw broke and wired together, and just all kinds of stuff like this. And this is a kid who'd never done anything, had never gotten in trouble in his entire life, who had been on this straight path to success and had always never failed at anything in his life. And so it was a total shock to him, to me. And I had so much distress around that. And I didn't know, and I should know. I say I should. I mean, I'm surprised now looking back at it that I knew nothing about alcoholism, considering my father was an alcoholic. My last husband was an alcoholic. You'd think I would stop and learn something, but I didn't. But now I had to. But before that, I just thought he was being stubborn. Like I couldn't understand. He's so sensible all the time. And yet here he is, you know, drinking until he winds up in the emergency room. I said, what is going on with him? And then he reached a point to where he became suicidal. And so he wound up in treatment, but that only helped a little. And eventually though, everything turned around. But in the meantime, like he's been sober now for a little over 2 years. But in the meantime, I went through hell, you know, as I tried to learn how to deal with this and I was so into the story. I was so completely into the story that I could not see. All the time I'm saying, okay, Holy Spirit, I need help. Help me, please, because I know I'm doing this wrong. But I couldn't see my way clear. And actually, my friend Nancy told me one day when we were talking, she said, you need to go to Al-Anon. And she never says stuff like that. So I took her seriously and I went to Al-Anon. It was extremely helpful. There was so much of it. There was very much like A Course in Miracles. I just slid right into Al-Anon with no trouble at all. Got a very good sponsor, did the steps. And then by that time, I had come out of the story. And I did go back and forth into it once in a while when things would get bad. But I would always come out of it. It was ever so much better. And then, I don't know, a few months ago, Toby, I've begun to recognize that something was wrong because he was, he wasn't sleeping, and he would go without sleep so long he would hallucinate, and he would get sick because he wasn't sleeping, and it was just turning into this cycle. I knew something was going on, but I didn't know what it was. Well, it turns out that he couldn't sleep, and so he would take a sleeping pill, and then he couldn't wake up, so he would take Adderall. And the Adderall would keep him from sleeping, so he had this cycle going. And then it would get to where he would enjoy that high you get from the Adderall, you know, being able to work and get things done, and he's a real achiever too. And so he loved that. And so then he was abusing it. He was taking way too much. It wasn't good. He was taking a period, but he was taking way too much. And he had a psychotic break. And this is very interesting to me because he called me right in the middle of it. And he was telling me about it, and I could tell he was afraid because he was doing things that he knew was crazy, and he was seeing things and hearing things. He was hallucinating like mad. And he knew he was hallucinating, but he wasn't sure which part was hallucination and which was real. And so he's telling me this, and I'm on the phone. Actually, I was on my way to the store. I pull over. And so I'm sitting there in a parking lot, and he's telling me this. And I was so aware of what was happening in me. I was so aware of it. It was like I was sitting over here, you know, to the left and behind and to the left. Because I was aware that I felt, what? You know, this, oh my God, what is he talking about? What is going on? And then when I began to realize what's happening, I started to cry, and then I couldn't. I mean, I didn't want to. I was like, and then I was like, oh, okay. You know, I'm not crying about this. I think that was just an old response, and I wasn't doing it anymore. And so I went home. I told him, I said, okay, I'm not helping you, so I'm going to hang up now. Because I could tell I wasn't saying anything that was being helpful. I called his sister, who she has a major in psychology, and she's a therapist, although she doesn't work as one. She knows about it. Plus, she's had her own problems, and she understands it from both sides. So I said, please call him and talk him down. And she said, at first she didn't want to do it. And I said, just do it for me. And she said, okay, I will. So she called him and kind of talked him down, and everything turned out to be okay for him. But I went home and I just kept watching my mind and going within, going within, going within, watching my mind, not kidding myself, not trying to be okay, just noticing when I wasn't okay and bringing that to Holy Spirit, and just continued to do that. And so this happened about 3 o'clock, and by the time I went to bed, I was pretty much okay. I mean, it was just like, this happened to him. I don't know where he is. I don't know. He was afraid. He thought the police were coming for him. And he thought he called the police and told on himself. He was like being crazy, was tearing things up. But evidently he didn't. That was part of the hallucination. But I didn't know. He could have been in jail. He could have been dead. I didn't know, because he was not getting in touch with anybody. And so I thought, well, I don't know what's wrong. And so I'm not going to go there. I don't know. And he could be asleep. He's probably asleep. I mean, because you have to come down eventually. And so I just left it alone. And the next day he called me and let me know he was okay, but he couldn't talk right then. He said, I can't talk. I'm too depressed and I'm too tired. And so, but the next day he called me and he just told me, he says, okay, I see what happened. And he says, I also see that I can't just correct my drinking. I'm going to have to look at my life, and which is the thing for him to do. And so everything, if this had happened even a few months before, well, at least if it happened maybe a year before, I would have been, and I don't know what I would have done. I might have just driven over there. I would have been an absolute wreck. I would have been like, oh my God, what has happened to my son? And I would have been trying to control it, trying to fix it, trying to make it right, trying to find some way to help. And he didn't need my help. He needed to work this out on his own. And I didn't feel like doing it. And that was just so different. And it was the best thing for me to do. So I've had stuff like that happen that shows me this is what, when you don't have guilt entering into it. Because if I'd been feeling guilt, if I thought he was guilty, I would have felt guilty for thinking it. And I would have been trying to do something. If I had felt guilty, I would have felt like I needed to do something. But when guilt doesn't enter into it, then it changes everything. And so sometime after that, I had been helping him. Every time he'd get himself into trouble, I would help him financially. And I wrote him a letter, and I told him, I'm not doing that anymore. I said, and that was a very nice letter, because I started the letter and I realized as I was writing it, oh, I'm making him guilty here. And so I'd go back to Holy Spirit. And I would ask him to correct my thinking. And I went back and I started to write it again, and it was a different letter, but it was still the same. I could feel guilt trying to enter into it. And so I said, my mind still needs to be healed. So now, this is what I do. Anytime I have to talk to anybody, anytime I have to say anything to anyone, if there's a problem, first, I correct my own thinking. And then I just, do whatever needs to be done. And so I got to finally, the third time, I said, okay, I think I feel right now. And I sat down, I wrote a very loving letter. And I told him, I'm not helping you doing this, and I'm not going to do it anymore. And I talked to him about how much I love him and about how what a wonderful person he is. But I couldn't have done that before either. I just couldn't have done it. But this time I did it, and I feel good about it. And he spoke to me about it. And he never said, oh, well, that's not right, or I wish you hadn't, or anything like that. He just said, I understand. And he said, and I know, Mom, that this isn't about the money. And I said, no, you're right. It's not about the money. And So it was just, again, I couldn't have done that had there been guilt, you know, in my mind. I just couldn't do it. In fact, when I tried to write it, it didn't come out right. I had to be completely clear, you know, before I could do that. So it just changes everything when you don't have the guilt, in my experience.
Not having the guilt, does that make you not judge like the election at all? Like,
Yeah, well, that took some work,
mhm.
you know, because I'm very, very, very Democrat in my thinking. And so this was painful for me when Trump was first elected. I was really upset about that. And over time, because the fact is, I really can't tolerate grievances anymore.
Mhm.
I just can't. And so I knew it had to go. And it didn't happen immediately. It was not an immediate thing, but it began to shift. And as I began to, and then of course there's the fact that somewhere along the line, I came to my senses and I was like, wait a minute, who am I mad at? You know, who's mad and who is she mad at? Because Trump is that's just his little image, his little character that is really all that we are as our bodies and our personalities. All that we are is a collection of beliefs. They've just been projected outward as if it's an image, a person, a real person, and as if it's me, you know, this Myron, this Virgo, this mother, this teacher, this whatever, you know, like that's me. It's just a collection of beliefs. And so it's the same for him too. And we're all doing the same thing. We're all trying to go home, whether we know it or not. We're all trying to go home. We're all trying to feel safe. We're all trying to feel loved. You know, so I just let all that go. It did not go immediately, but it went over that period of time, which has been 4 years now, huh? Almost 4 years. Anyway, however long it's been, it was like the first couple of years, it was a struggle, but then last year it just kind of became not a struggle. And now it's just like, I don't think of it that way anymore. And so something happened just yesterday, the day before, I think it was. I had gone to the a dealership to leave my car for them to work on it. And so there's this older fella, he drives a van and he'll take you home if you don't want to sit around there. So I had him take me home. And so he's very much a Republican, as is almost everybody else in Louisiana. And so he was talking and he was saying, you know, he said, I really think this whole virus thing is just going to go away after the election. And so his idea was that the Democrats have thought it all up to keep Trump from being elected. And so I said, well, I don't think they could have done it for the whole globe. And he's like, well, maybe, you know. Anyway, so, but the thing about it is I was talking to my daughter lately because both my girls are really political and they're really activists and they're very into this. And so I get this all the time. And so I was telling her, you know, I said, Susan, I said, what he's feeling is the same thing that you're feeling. He wants to be safe. That man wants to be safe, and he thinks the way he can be safe is as if Trump
continues to be president. Right.
And I said, he thinks that Democrats are trying to take his safety away. And I said, you think you want to be safe, and you think that Republicans are trying to take your safety away. They're trying to rig the election. He thinks the Democrats are rigging it. You think the Republicans are. I said, but do you see how it's really the same thing? You know, I said that you're really both feeling the same thing. You really both want the same thing. You just don't see it in the same way. Well, she couldn't really get that because she was stuck on, but I'm right.
Right. That's what
He's wrong and I'm right. And I understand that. I used to believe that too. You know, so I get it. So I just left her alone with it. But maybe, who knows, she might have got something out of that. Something may have hurt her somewhere down there. It might have been a little seed planted there. But so yeah, that was just I had never really talked to a Republican about their attitude, you know, toward it. And I don't think every Republican thinks the same thing he did, but you know, that the attitude is the same. I want to be safe, and this is the way I'm going to be safe.
Right.
And so, so it just really occurred to me, oh, hey, that's you know, we just all want the same thing here. It just made it feel very different to me, in a way.
I love what you said to your daughter. So, you know, I've got so much out of the sharing, and also Regina's sharing, just because of. It's funny how you ask. You know, I ask inside, I need certain things, and I got them tonight. And you know, just saying to, showing like, you know, I can't tell my friends this who just want to be safe, because that's not. But I would maybe say to my children, you know, rather than, you know, why don't we look at what we're really looking at? Because I love the way you explained that. That was beautiful. You know, you had a lot of healing. I know you have a tape that's on Pathways of Light, right? That's about your healing with your family.
Could be, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it's CDs, yeah.
Right. Thanks, Myron.
Kind of written a while back, but yeah.
Thanks, Sharon. That was a great conversation there. You know, I mean, what if the only block to your awakening was your judgment of Trump?
Yeah, no kidding, huh? That's exactly right. You know,
you gotta love the man. You gotta see him as innocent.
Well, and yes, absolutely. That's why I said I can't hold any grievances. I just can't. I mean, that grievance is the thing that's standing between me and I don't know, whatever you want to call it, salvation, God, knowing myself. That's what's keeping me in hell, is that grievance, you know. So I just can't. When I notice a grievance, I start going to work on it immediately. I can't see any point in it. We're one. If there's truly non-duality, and there is, then who am I mad at?
I see we have just a few minutes left. Is there anybody else that had a question that they haven't raised? Now's your opportunity.
Thank you, George. Myron, can you hear me?
I sure
Yes,
can.
yes.
Myron, Roy here. I don't have a question. I do have a profound statement for me to express my gratitude for the healing process in my life as I journey through life on this journey of awakening with you over the years. So all I can say is thank you, Myron.
Well, thank you. Love you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Going once? I noticed that Sonia, you know, Spirit is playing a joke on Sonia because Sonia loves to talk. Anybody that knows Sonia knows she is chomping at the bit to talk, but she doesn't have a speaker.
Oh, no.
I have a question.
Yes. Oh, okay, go ahead.
My name is Thea. I'm asking my question for my friend Tammy because she's not sure how to do the Zoom stuff. But if we are all of God, where did the confusion originally come from?
You know, I think, you know, all I could tell you would be an idea that I have. You know, I don't remember. You know, the way I explained it to myself is that that, you know, we are creators, and when we have an idea, then that idea is a creation. And so we had an idea of that, of separation, and the idea perhaps it was like, you know, what would that be like? And then it unfolds, because that's what creation does. I I don't think of it as like something bad, you know. I just think that it was, I think perhaps we have played in all this so long that we have forgotten how we got here, and that we can, and that we don't have to stay. And that's when we have things like A Course in Miracles and other paths that will take us out of it as we're ready. But, you know, as I say, this is just my way of looking at it, my way of thinking about it. I don't know if anybody could actually answer that who is on the planet, but sorry, don't have a good answer for that one.
Oh, that was great. Thank you.
I'm not too much into looking at them. I mean, I used to be, because it was fascinating, and my ego mind loved to look at all these ideas, but I kind of lost interest in doing that because I just don't see the answers, and I don't see how it's helping me. I'm more of a what can I do? What can I change? What can I heal? What would be helpful for me in this moment? You know, so that's where my focus tends to be.
Thanks, Myron. I want to read Sonia's. She did type in, the Holy Spirit called Myron the master gardener to me because she plants the awakening seeds. We are also very grateful to her careful tending of those tender seeds that grew into a committed spiritual path. So,
thank you, Sonia. Love you. Sorry you can't talk.
you know, in the book of Genesis, there's, after God did the creation, I think there's a verse in there that said, God looked at it and said, this is good. So I've got to think that if that's true, that God looks upon us and says, this is good. I mean, we judge ourselves as being not good enough, and you know, we need to do something different. But I'm not sure God sees us that way.
No, I don't think so. You're right. You are so right, George.
So anyway, we got like 2 minutes, maybe. Anybody else last?
You know, let me say this about in the Course, Jesus says that God honors even our miscreations because of who we are. So that certainly doesn't sound like a judgment on what we have done. That he honors even our miscreations simply because of who we are. If we really, really knew who we were, if we just got a glimpse of who we were, well, we wouldn't be here anymore. Who would want to be here? So.
Well, thanks so much, Myron. So we've spent the last hour and a half listening to Myron Jones, and what a great, you know, it's so good that we are recording these things because then we can go back and listen again, because there's points that, you know, it's hard to get all of this wisdom in one session here. So thanks so much, Myron, for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me. I very much enjoyed this.
Thank you for watching this Satsang. If you enjoyed this, please visit our website, awakening-together.org. There's plenty of inspiration to be found. Thank you again for watching.